Hello and welcome to All Things Christian Rock. We are now well into January of 2021. 2020 was a pretty interesting year in music. I don't want to go too into it in this video. If you want my in-depth thoughts about the year as a whole on the industry particularly, check out my personal YouTube channel. I did a video very recently about all that, and make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed already. The main thing that you need to know from that video going into this one, though, is that it was definitely a year for singles. There was a lot of really good singles. Trilogy by Silent Planet in particular is one of my favorites. Nine Lashes are back. They are dropping singles left and right. However, that's not what this video is. This video is the top 10 albums, so any of those singles, anything like that, not going to be included, so don't attack me in the comments. Before we get into this, make sure to subscribe. Check the description of this video for all sorts of stuff, links to my social medias, links to the All Things Christian Rock Spotify playlists, as well as all the stuff for my personal YouTube channel. Particularly, keep an eye out in the description for the Best of 2020 playlist, where you can hear all of these songs and more. So without further ado, let's get into the top 10 albums of 2020. Number 10 is going to be The Path by Fit for a King. And that might come as a shock to some people why it's so low on the list. I went more in depth into it in that video I mentioned before. Again, check it out if you haven't. It's a good video. But basically, my main beef with the album was that it didn't really do a good job of blending the traditional Fit for a King sound with the old school, more technical metalcore stuff that they were adding in by having their new guitarist. I will say, though, that it made the list just because the songs that are good are pretty dang good. But really, that's just like the back half of the album. The first half, I could take it or leave it, but the second half of the album is prestigious. Number 9 is going to be Isolate by Deathbreaker. I'm a big sucker for Facedown Records bands in general. This is not the only Facedown band who's going to be on this list, but Facedown's kind of been overrun in the last few years by all their rock bands, and I feel like their metal and hardcore bands get overlooked a lot of the time. Deathbreaker is a newer band. This is their second release, and it is just so good. Crazy, noisy, but very clean at the same time, if that makes any sense. When I was a freshman in high school, I was in a noisy sounding punk hardcore kind of band, and this is the kind of stuff that I would listen to for influence. Stuff that made me think of bands like The Chariot or Norma Jean or Stick to Your Guns. Very tight musicianship, and they had great compositions, but noisy guitars, messy sounding chords, all guitar feedback intentionally, all that kind of stuff, and I am a huge sucker for all that stuff. Number 8 on the list is Guardians by August Burns Red. I go back and forth about whether I even want to keep talking about August Burns Red on this channel, if I'm being honest. Primarily just because that they've pretty much said that they're no longer a Christian band ever since they left Solid State Records, which, come to think of it, it's been a while. It's been a while since they were on Solid State. But since Jake is such a prominent voice in the Christian metal community still, and they still write a lot of music that is not only Christian appropriate, but there are even songs like Lighthouse on this album that just straight up sound like Christian songs. So yeah, I'm kind of back and forth about whether I want to keep talking about them on the channel or not, but I'm going to talk about them in this video at least. Because Guardians is just a very good album. Top-notch metalcore. I would say more or less August Burns Red have kind of sounded the same for a very long time. However, it takes it more to the compositional level, whereas a lot of their stuff, especially in their early music, was just them being a bunch of kids who are good musicians and they just wanted to push themselves musically, whereas this stuff, it's not necessarily their fastest stuff, their most complicated stuff, but they were just focused on writing really good songs and having really good compositions, and the production is top-notch. The dynamics are really cool. There is some newer or less familiar stuff guitar-wise for them on this album as well. Honestly, one of my favorite August Burns Red albums overall. Number 7, I'm kind of cheating on this one, which is a good indication that, like I stated, this is a year for singles, not a year for albums. But both of the EPs made by Earthgroans. Prettiest of Things and Waste. I personally think Prettiest of Things is a little bit better, but the opening track on Waste has Brooke Reeves of Impending Doom, who is one of my favorite vocalists of all time. And kind of like what I was saying with Deathbreaker, I'm just a really big fan of noisy sounding guitars and chaotic energy. And both of these take it up to the next level. And I have actually found that you can kind of rearrange these songs from these two EPs and make a full-length album out of it. And it sounds very cohesive. I assume they probably worked with the same team when they were recording both. Very honest lyrics and a big determining factor for any music I like. Very sick guitar tones. Number 6 is Evoke by Unseen Faith. Deathcore in general just doesn't wow me much anymore. I like it, but it's a genre that it's limited by definition. And so after it's been around for over a decade like it has been, it all starts to sound either the same or stale, or when they try new things, people get mad about it because they're like, well, it's not real deathcore anymore. But this was a breath of fresh air, in part because it's a little more metalcore than it is deathcore. A lot of these songs are on constant repeat. If you're listening to the new music playlist, you're probably listening to a lot of Unseen Faith because they're just that freaking good. Like I said, kind of just more than it is actually deathcore. It's more of a dark, deafened version of metalcore, if you will. Number 5 is also a cheat because, again, not really a year for albums, Swan Dive by Off-Road Minivan. And the reason this is a cheat is because they're not even really a Christian band. Their frontman is the singer/bassist for Fit for a King, Tuck as we know him. And they're on Tooth and Nail Records, which is historically a Christian label, but they've openly said that they're not anymore. So this is a cheat, but it's high up on my list because it's just that good. It's a phenomenal album. My senior year in high school, I played bass in a indie rock band. And when I listen to this, I think of a lot of the same stuff. Kind of sounds like Tuck might have been going through a heartbreak or something when he was writing this album. It's also got just a cool variety of different influences. It's not that heavy, so don't go into it thinking it's going to be like Fit for a King. It's kind of indie rock, alternative rock. There's so much cool guitar stuff. I definitely think a lot of drums nowadays are either fake or they're overproduced. I don't think that's true on this. I wouldn't know for sure, but if you told me that those were at least 90% real drums, I'd believe you. The musicianship is really good. It's really tight, and lots of really cool layers. Besides the fact that the songs are really good, part of what kept me coming back to it is just because of how it's made. Every time I listen to it, I hear something new that I haven't heard before. Whether it's a little bit of ear candy on the production or it's another layer in the guitars of what they're playing. Very, very fun listen. Number 4 is Fury by Failure by Lightworker. They're not like a brand new band. They've been around for a little bit, but this is their first major album release. They just signed to Solid State Records in 2020, I think. They came out swinging with their hit track Empire, and all the singles that they put out between then and when the actual album dropped were also stellar. And then the rest of the album isn't filler. It's all really good. This is kind of my personal favorite style of metal. It's very dynamic and a lot of really cool stuff going on. Top-notch guitar playing, very complex, but we got a good breakdown and like pretty much every song. Great vocalist. His screams, great. His singing, better. And so they got a wide variety of songs. They got some songs that are really, really heavy. They got some like in-between songs. They got some rock kind of ballady stuff almost. It's refreshing is what it is. Just because you don't get a lot of this kind of metalcore anymore. A lot of metalcore nowadays is just chug fest and really low tunings. Their guitars aren't even tuned like ridiculously low or anything. The songs are really good. And if you want to check out on Solid State Records YouTube channel, there's a cool little mini-series where their singer and their guitar player break down the songs and what they mean, which I also thought was really cool. They seem like very thoughtful individuals. Number 3 is Declaration by Red. I kind of went into this more on my video that I was talking about. Like, this is my 3rd time talking about it now, where I was breaking down 2020 in general. But basically, it is kind of weird that it could be my favorite band of all time, and it's not like my favorite thing that came out this year. I'll keep it brief since I talked about it so in depth over on that video. But basically, like, yeah, this album had a lot of things going for it. This is their first independent release. This is the first album where Dan Johnson is officially their drummer. And they just wanted to go all out. They wanted to make the heaviest album they had ever made, to the point where it was basically just Korn with violins. I think they ended up spending like a week just recording violins in the studio, which is really cool. But honestly, the songs are fairly mediocre. They're kind of mid-tier for Red. It's not my favorite stuff they've ever written. It's not my least favorite stuff they've ever written. All of it's good. I don't think any of it is bad. It's just, it's mid-tier for Red, which I know that it's number 3 on my list and it sounds like I'm talking smack, but I'm not. I promise I'm not. It's really good. Otherwise, it wouldn't be number 3 on my list. I just thought that was kind of weird. But the guitar tones are awesome. The choruses that really stand out, and really it is Red's heaviest album. I have a personal playlist on Spotify that's just like all of Red's music, and you know, I'll just listen to it and shuffle a lot. It's kind of nice to hear those really, really heavy songs in contrast with some of the softer stuff from earlier on in their career. It's kind of cool balance, though. I would say that the album would have more time to breathe and probably hit a little harder and probably seem heavier overall if there was even just a couple softer songs to kind of balance it out. However, I did hear that Anthony is already working on something new that may or may not be for Red, but a lot of string arrangements going on for that, which would be cool. Maybe it's already a new Red album. I doubt it, but maybe. But they are independent. They can kind of do whatever they want. So it does definitely have me excited for Red's future. Number 2 on my list is Taming Tongues by Dens, another Face Down Records band. I'll give you a hint. Number 1's also a Face Down Records band. Dens' album Taming Tongues was a great way to start 2020. All the singles leading up to the release were great. It's kind of like what I was saying about a record earlier, where it doesn't feel like anything is filler. All of it is great, but it definitely feels like a concept album. It's definitely an album that it hits you best, and the songs themselves hit you best if you listen to it from song 1 all the way down in order without interruption. And that, my friend, is my favorite way to listen to an album, just in general. So maybe that's part of why it's so high on my list. But the musicianship is really cool. It's kind of got like an alternative indie rock vibe, but in a very modern hard rock shell. A lot of my favorite rock songs from the year are from that album. Before I get to what my number 1 pick is, make sure to like the video, subscribe. If there's an album that was in your top 10 and wasn't in mine, let me know in the comments what it was, and I will check it out if I haven't listened to it yet. And also make sure to check out my personal stuff and all of the Spotify playlists. So number 1 on the list is going to have to be Influenced by Everything in Slow Motion. I've talked about this album a decent amount. Again, I talked about it in my 2020 music overview video, so I'll just kind of briefly touch on it here. But basically, it's got a lot of the things that I just love about music. High dynamic contrast, beautiful production, really impressive musicianship, very thought out lyrics, very thought out arrangements. It's just everything that you can love about music, all wrapped up into one. It's not even overproduced or anything, but there's just a lot of really creative things going on. Lots of cool synths, cool guitar effects, just some really interesting ear candy and stuff like that. Everything in Slow Motion were kind of like the post-metal core kind of stuff earlier on in their career, and they've kind of moved into this kind of more rock, and I like it a lot more. Best album that came out this year, by far. So thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to do all the things I mentioned earlier, and yeah, I will see you in the next video.